I'm going to start. I'm just going to start with a few things which I'm just going to start with. Is first an introduction of myself. I am Nischaiy Pradhan. I'm one of the alumni from the College of Business Studies. Additionally, I'm a founding partner of a company called Favcy, which works with idea stage non-tech founders primarily to help them a co-build products, digital products and digital platforms with them, and also fund that particular digital platform, the creation of that itself. So we work with really early idea stage guys. So I mean, this is something which is day in day out, which I keep on doing with these guys itself. Right. So it's interesting as to what is starting up all about. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to break my entire bit down on starting up into say four factions. I think the first faction is about the founders themselves. Right. I think I'll deep down deeper into why you should start up and why you should not. I think the why you should not list is larger and longer. Um, and it has nothing to do with the business that you're building. It has nothing to do with the product that you're building. It's about the mindset that you have to get in, right? I think post that, what I'll do is I'll talk about a little bit about the business side of it as to how businesses get built typically, and what is more important, right? So there are some core elements in a startup which you can see obviously, and what is more important. Is it team? Is it product? Is it the market that you're in? Right. So I think we'll talk about that a little bit more. Um, Additionally, what we'll also do is we'll talk about VCs. I think we'll talk about the golden rule as to why they say no. Right. I think it's important to understand why venture capitalists say no across tube for funding itself. Uh, I think all of this will be given in a context. Even though I named it post COVID-19 era or world that you're going to be in and starting up in that particular aspect of it, I believe that it happens irrespective, right? So if you're in a rational environment or an irrational environment like the one that we're in, I think the larger question is the fundamentals typically still stay the same, right? So I think there are clauses which are there, which are asterisk marks, which are there across these three factions, which where you can see opportunities. I think there is one opportunity that with the post-COVID world that you'll see, and then you'll see an era where there will be things which will be tougher, right? So every pro has a con to balance it out itself, right? So that becomes the key thing. So I'll just quickly jump into it because there are like, I think now there's 7 to 8 odd folks inside the webinar. So let me start with some positives. Why startup, right? I think a lot of people start up for very different various reasons, and I'll try to uh, summarize that into like 4 points maybe. And this is something which I wrote in the morning itself. So there's no presentation as such. So bear with me. I just woke up and I started writing down my experience as we go along, right? So why startup? I think the most important thing is it gives control over your destiny itself, right? So I think that's one of the most freeing things as an entrepreneur that you get. You control a lot more things. I think you're not under the control of someone else altogether, or some system which has been created in a large organization, which you are a cog in the wheel itself, right? So you get a lot more control about what you want to do, and I think that's one of the most important things that when you're starting up, why you should start up, right? You also get to create something new, right? I think the challenge of creating something new, something different, something really nice, and something that you can call yourself, call your own, is something which really brings out a key need that needs to get satiated as a human being altogether, right? The third point is that you create a major impact, right? So I think from an employment point of view, from a point of view of creating impact across the society, all of these things are a part and parcel of it, right? So um, I think you are more impactful. And in fact, the larger and the more mature as a startup you get, you typically tend to have more impact. So like when I say that, what I mean is, say even if you move a pen and you sign a particular contract, the impact of that is multifold, right? So there, I mean, you sign something over here, and then there's something which happens on the other side, which is getting you business worth 1 CR, 2 CR, or whatever. I mean, if you want to get into the impact side of measuring impact per se, right? So the last, I think, that is something which everyone, I think, thinks of this as the underlying reason as to why you should start up, is that there's a huge money consideration. I think you build up a lot of assets, high valued assets that you build across, um, and uh, and that's true, right? So I think you should be monetarily compensated for all the effort and the hard work that you put in. Now that's where the good news ends. I think that's where I'll say from a founder perspective, if you have these four, or I mean any of the two of the four, or any of the three, or even all four of the reasons as to why you wanted to start up, you're golden. I think the larger conversation comes in when you have to start talking about why not to start up, right? And that's more interesting for me, because if I have to write down the list, I have a very long list over here. I think it's an emotional roller coaster. You go through ups and downs, mostly downs. And it's a very weird thing. Someday, I mean, you'll have some everything going according to plan, and the very next day it'll go bad. In fact, it might not even just need 24 hours. It just might need an hour to go completely bad across the board, right? So, and it's a constant flipping of emotion, right? So you flip from one side to the other side, to the other side, the other side, over and over and over and over and over again, right? And it's unrelenting, right? So it just does not stop. So if you're not one of the people who believe that they can be emotionally stable and they can't uh, look into, I mean, they can't go through an emotional roller coaster, I think you should not start up. Right? I think my today's bit will be more about why you shouldn't start up rather than why you should start up, because I think a lot of people do a disservice of not telling you not to start up also. Um, the other side challenge is that nothing happens until unless you make it happen, right? So weirdly, what happens in large companies is there are systems and processes which are set in, where there is discipline which is maintained on these systems altogether, and somehow weirdly, even at large scale, these companies are able to move work, right? So when I say move work, what I mean is that that email that has to be sent will be sent irrespective, right? That report which has to be generated will be generated. And that actually happens in large organizations, right? Because there's that sort of bit which they've already maintained about creating systems and processes. I think that doesn't happen with startups, right? So until unless you're in it to make it happen, nothing else will happen, right? So you really, really need to get into that particular sort of a mode altogether. Then the other challenge is you need to start learning how to take a no, right? So there will be a lot more people who will say no to you. I think that is imperative, and it's also one of the reasons why I believe good sales folks who have sales experience are more or less likely to be founders, because what happens in that particular scenario is that you know they've heard no so many times. You have to learn how to take, I mean, hear a no out, right? Because you will hear a lot more no's than you will hear a lot of yeses. And even when you hear yeses, what will happen is that those yeses are going to turn into maybes, and then they're going to turn into no's, right? So you really need to understand that there is a lot of no's coming your way across. Fourth, hiring is quite possibly the biggest pain in the ass that you'll ever, I mean, go through. Uh, I think if I have to, uh, if I have to just talk about the number of people who've gaslighted you, into believing that they're going to come on board. They run you through the whole HR process of going through the whole motions. Um, it becomes a challenge, right? So people do not leave cushy jobs. I think that is something which, as a realization, should come across. So, like if you're working in a really large corporate, uh, as an engineer or as a product manager or I mean anything, right? So most likely you are not going to leave your job because you're used to a certain lifestyle, and uh, and because of that, for a founder who's starting up, hiring becomes a huge pain, because getting someone to get onboarded, again, as I said, you might get a yes initially, but eventually when it comes down to really leaving your job and getting joining up over there and putting down your papers, I think it doesn't translate well. It genuinely doesn't translate well. um, the fifth point is that there's no work-life balance. I think you can just go out there and say there is no work-life balance altogether. Um, and it goes for a toss. I mean, as much as anyone wants to maintain that work-life balance, as much as I want to, it's really hard. You can't maintain. I mean, at least when you're a founder, at least, I mean, maybe the team can. I mean, the early team, or maybe the team which goes out eventually, can create some sort of work-life balance. But as a founder, I think you should say goodbye to your work-life balance, because it's a complete joke, right? It's a myth that you get work-life balance if you're a founder. Um, okay, so the sixth point is your culture, the work culture that you're trying to foster, whether it's a competitive one, it's a friendly one, it's a fun one, or whatever it is that you're aspiring to be as a culture, the work culture that you can go to shit at any particular point of time, right? So uh, there will be so many instances in your life that it will just go bad across the board, and it can go really bad, and it can go from the weirdest things from one particular side of uh, I mean, there's so many different examples that where it can go really bad. For example, in an ultra competitive environment, competition could possibly become a real major hassle altogether, right? So it could become really toxic as we speak. So cultures can go to shit. And lastly, I think this is where COVID comes into picture, is that there are so many external factors, there are so many X factors which are involved that you do not know of, that it can go to shit across as we speak, right? So Corona is one, right? So this is not the only one, right? So it's a natural disaster, it's a natural pandemic that has been created. Um, so so is an market crashing. So is an earthquake. So is anything, man. I mean, so there's so many various external factors that you have to look into, that you have to be strong about it. So if you're afraid of uncertainties of external factors being put into picture, I think you should not start up. So that is prima facie my entire list of why you shouldn't start up and why you should start up. What is interesting is I've not even gotten into the business building part of it yet. What product to build, I've not even gotten into that. How do you build a particular product? What market are you targeting? I've not gotten into any of those details. So I think this is a very founder focused bit that I'm talking about. I think that is imperative if you're starting up. Very important as we speak, right? So uh, now I think, because I've focused a lot on the founder side, I think what I'll do is I'll move towards a little bit on the business, the product side of things, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that. While we're doing that, I think I'm just going to launch a poll for you guys. What you'll do is you'll get a poll over here, and I wanted to just vote on this particular poll itself. So I'm just launching it. Yes, perfect. You'll see a particular poll, and we can, while I continually while I present, you guys can vote over here as to what you think is the most likely cause of your startup to succeed, right? Uh, so let me just start with on the product or the business side of it. I think one of the key things that you will look into as we go along is that if you get a bunch of startups, say 50, 100 odd startups, you will start. There will be different patterns, I think, but on a consistent level, if you create like a capsizing of say uh, 100 startups on a regular basis, there are two key what do you call things that will come out, and that is true for a lot of aspects altogether. Is that you'll see two aspects. One very very important aspect is that you'll see this sort of a trend, right? In those 100 startups, you'll see more failures, right? So a large chunk of startups will be failures, right? And a bunch of them will be mild successes. Some bit of them will be highly successful, and a very select bunch will be insanely successful. So I think that distribution and is there. Similarly, you look at three elements coming into picture across the board, right? So the three elements which will come across on the elements will be team, right? Products and markets, right? So team, products, and markets become the three prima facie areas that you'll work towards, right? And so let me just define team a little bit more. I think team is a lot of people think about it from an experience point of view, right? So I'm not talking about team from an experience point of view. I think I'm talking about individuals, and specifically when it comes down to tech startups, these are individuals who've not done this before, right? So there's a new take, there's a new set of ideals and values, and set of thinking which a startup team brings, which most likely has never done it before. And in that scenario, what they do is they look into uh, execution. I think is the key term that I look out. I think if I believe a particular team can execute, right, I think that becomes important. And execution more than experience for me is actually paramount, right? So you could be as experienced as possible, and I think when I say this, I think specifically when it comes down to hiring really high level experienced employees, I think I've I've typically not had good success over there. I think it's I think looking into people who have great execution, I think is what I look out for. So that's team, right? Similarly, you look at second, yeah. Then you look at the quality of the product, right? So quality of the product. What is quality of the product? Is it easy to utilize? Yes. I mean, that's one way of. Is it feature rich? Like, does it have a lot of features built into it? Fair enough. That's another way of describing how a good product works. Is it the speed? I think how quickly can the product load? I mean, when you're talking about digital products, that becomes one of the things. Are there any bugs which are there from a tech point of view itself? So that's how you rate like a good product. And I think one of the toughest challenges to get a great product, right? So getting a great product is very different from getting a great business, but a great product is the toughest thing that you can ever achieve. And finally comes to market, right? So market definition is a customer base, growing audience, acceptability, needs, understanding that, so on and so forth, right? So your great team, great product, great market becomes a part and parcel of it. Now, every team ranges from a remarkable team to quite essentially worthless, right? So, I mean, there are teams which are worthless, and then there are teams which are great. So that's the range that you work in with, right? Again, products will also work in a similar range where a marvelous product is created and not so great product is also there, right? And finally, when you come down to markets, I think there are two types of markets. There is a market which is really really popping. Right? It is really buzzing as we speak, and one is in comatose. Now, And what I'll just do is I'll finish off the poll over here because I'm coming towards that. So here are the results. A lot of you think, I think five of you think that great products uh, will most likely cause your startup to succeed. Two of you find a great team, and one of you finds great markets make good products itself, or great products altogether. So let me just come down with what makes success, right? So, I mean, out of these three factors, again, I'm not trying to say that I mean, one factor is more important or the other factors aren't important. All of them are important, right? But what is causing success, right? So, what is making things move across the board itself? Um, I think the easiest answer to say is team, because I'll tell you from an idea perspective why it's easy to say team. It's because you don't know what the product is, you do not know what the market is. What you know is who's starting it up, right? So I think the easiest answer, a lot of VCs will give you that, a lot of investors will give you that, a lot of founders will give you that, weirdly, is that team is the key aspect which does the job for I don't know. I mean for the startup itself, because again, we've been brought up in an environment where there's a huge push towards increasing your self-esteem, right? So you're special is what you've been told across the board. I think that gets passed on as we go along, and from your schooling to your college, we've been told we are special, right? So I think that just resonates with us a lot more because of that. And I mean, who do you think is that sort of a person who says people don't matter, right? Right? Because I think I personally believe that people do matter. Yes, they do matter. I think the importance changes across the board, right? And yeah, I mean, you don't want to be the guy who says people don't matter, but I somehow will be the guy who will say that eventually, because I know what my thought process is going to flow here. Uh, then will come engineers, right? So I think there's a special category of people which I call engineers, people who code products, people who are into products, who are product managers. They will always say product, right? Product is the most important thing. Great products make great companies. Look at the example of Apple. Look at the example of Google. Um, Great. I mean, I think that is true. I think until unless you have a great product which you can sustain across the years, with a great engineering team, with a great product team in place, I think that is of the utmost importance when you're creating digital products or when you're starting up, right? But honestly speaking, if you ask me, great products, while they are great, they become great over time, right? It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm online is to go to this really nifty piece of software called the Wayback Machine. And what Wayback Machine does is that it basically archives pages as to how they look across the years. Now, tell me, I mean, look at say a successful startup like Dream 11 right now in India, and look at their Wayback Machine of same in 2010, because they're a 10-year-old, around a 10-year-old startup, if I'm not wrong. So 2011-12, you can see their pages altogether, and you see what kind of design elements that they have. You see the kind of product that they've created. Just from looking at the UI, you know it's not the best product out there in the market, right? So um, great companies tend to not have great products also at initial starting points itself. And that brings me to the last point, actually, which I personally believe in. I think it's great markets. Great markets define great products, because I'll come down to it. Why great markets? Because great markets pull out great products also, right? So the demand for a particular idea is so much, and the need for certain features is so much that those things will be pulled out, from the team itself, right? So you will have customers demanding a particular feature. You will have customers looking into all of this stuff altogether. So a great market will always put out a great product. So a good product will come out of it eventually, right? And products don't need to be great, right? So I mean, again, so one of the key things which I keep on talking about is how products, great products, brilliant products are not the most important thing, because what they'll do is they'll slow you down to go to market, getting that important feedback, validation on the product side itself, which will, I mean, sort of, I mean, as a product, you should just work on fulfilling a certain need itself, right? Right. So your MVP should just be bare bones, where you're just fulfilling the need that you stand as a product company for, right? And again, because you're in a great market, um, that will work, because their expectation, because you're tapping into an unserved market, right? So typically what happens is an unserved market getting tapped in, their expectations are already very low, right? So then you start looking at a lot of other different things also. But conversely, it's not true, right? So if you have a bad market and great team, great product, you can be the best of teams in the world possible, but you'll face hurdles across. You'll face everything across the board. Which actually gets me to certain questions which get asked specifically when I say something like this. The first question is that typically, team is the most thing that is the only out of all the three core elements that you can control, right? So what does a great team get? Doesn't a great team automatically translate into a great market, or doesn't a great team automatically translate into a great product? That's not true, right? So I mean, a great team can help. I think it increases the probability, but it's still a probability, right? I can name of nth number of incidents where a great team hasn't translated into a great product, right? Where a great team hasn't translated into a great market either, right? So I think even a weaker team can get a great market and will have more success as compared to a great team and a great product having been in a very very bad market itself, right? So it does not translate. I mean, at the max that you can hope from a great team is an okayish product, right? Because great products are really really hard to build. They're bloods and sweats and tears of years and years and data points that you've been collecting over the years, which eventually leads to like a really awesome product altogether, right? Another question which comes in that can't great products create their own market? Yes, absolutely. I think uh, great products, if done correctly, very very good products. Uh, and I'll use the word very specifically over here. Transformative products will tend to outdo the market across the board, right? So because they'll create a new market, but they have to be transformative. So an example of that is Tesla. Why I pick up Tesla is because I mean, there wasn't any market for electronic cars. I mean, some people were doing it, but it wasn't done in a very transformative manner. You didn't have a supercar coming in the form of an electric car altogether, right? Making it look really really cool and really transforming that market. I think um, if you're trying to say that you're going to create your own market because your product is so transformative, you have to look at that particular level, right? Anything short of that, you need to have a great market, right? Anything short of that, you need to have great markets, right? Which actually brings down and boils down everything, according to me, in a business into one thing, which is product market fit. I think that's the only thing which matters, and that should be the only thing which matters to you as a startup. And early idea stage startup, you should. That's the only thing. In fact, I go as much as saying that you should divide your time as a startup into two parts: before product market fit and after product market fit, right? And if you're an idea stage company, which is before product market fit, do everything at all costs to figure out the product market fit. Because if you have a product market fit, you can have the most insane number of challenges across the board. The CEO of your company might just be in a relationship with a venture capital lady who's funded him, right? It could be a lot of weird things, but the startup will work, right? You can say a lot of these things across the board, but if you have PMF, you have PMF. A competent team will be able to do it. I mean, again, so I'm saying it's if you achieve product market fit, it's also imperative that you hold on to it. A competent team will always hold on to it. You can screw it up left, right, and center. Again, very important to understand. Team is important also, but a really bad team will screw it up also. Like will let go of that opportunity. But the life changes across the board because your customers are coming in on a regular basis. They're asking for it. They're asking for your services. The kind of problems that you generally face are off your shoulders, right? So in the after PMF cycle itself, because what you've done is you've figured out that sweet spot that you work with, right? You've really hit the nail over there. Also very important, I think. I'm not dissing any startup founder, but I think any successful startup founder, if you ask them uh, what made their startup successful, um, they cite everything from great team, great engineering, great investors also at some level, to a lot of different things, right? To their idea, to this, so on and so forth. But I think everyone forgets to cite the markets, right? So the PMF being the most important thing, they forget to cite that. And I think there are a lot of things which go right in a startup if you're in one. But I think the most important causation for you for success is PMF, a product market fit. What is more important to me in a COVID and a post COVID-19 scenario is one of the key things which you will realize as you go along is there are more market opportunities, right? So what COVID has done for a lot of people is that it has forced them to adopt, right? So I can give you an example which is not COVID. I can go about with like say demonetization and look at what sort of adoption it brought about, right? So it brought about Paytm, the adoption of a lot of merchants. It brought about the NPCI, UPI payments. The digitization of the payment mechanics was one of the key things and the key adoption that demonetization brought in, right? So in a situation of crisis, human beings tend to adopt more, and the adaptability is far more. So I think what will happen is you will start seeing a lot of large markets suddenly adopting a lot of things. The market will be ready. There will be a demand for certain things, and herein lies the opportunity, right? Herein lies an opportunity, a golden opportunity of creating a great company, right? Because great markets, according to me, define really good companies. So you have to look at this as an opportunity because there are going to be a lot more opportunities coming for you to start up because there's a lot more adoption and the market is more ready to adopt products as we go along, right? So I think it's one of the most exciting times when you can start up as an entrepreneur altogether, right? So that brings me up to speed with business. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch very slightly on funding, right? And I will actually focus on one thing. I will focus on why people say no across to you for funding altogether, right? So first and foremost, let me set some context. If one person or two people say no to you on the funding side, if you've ever gone and pitched, they might be having a bad day, right? So I mean, it could be a bad day. It could be a company of a similar name which did something really bad to him, or it could be in this similar segment they've invested before, did not get a great exit, or did not the company went bankrupt, so on and so forth, right? So it could be multiple reasons where if you just gone across to one, two, three odd people, uh, coincidence is just bad luck, pure bad luck. But once you hit the 7 or the 6 mark and you've been getting a no, I think it's time that you start rethinking what your pitches are, start thinking about what your B plan looks like. And I think laying down the most important thing from there is that say you've approached 20, right, VCs. One of the key truths about VCs is that they never say no. Right? They don't say no. The reason why they don't say no is they want, because they realize one thing, right? They don't want to invest into your company right away with the current facts that you've presented across to them. But if those facts change, there has to be a door open for you to come back and show the new facts so that they can invest, right? And that's where you need to really start maintaining your relationship with VCs. I think you need to get, once you pitched, you need to get feedback. They will never give you the correct feedback. I think telling someone their product is shit is the toughest thing in anyone's job across the board, right? You should thank them for their time, because I think if they've sat down with you for a meeting, because there are a lot of people who keep on coming across to you, they've taken out time, they've taken out certain things from their life where they kind of try to prioritize something else, um, and taken out time to actually meet you, and it's not turned into a yes. So see, VCs or institutional investors, or even for that matter, angel investors, sorry, are are just doing two things, right? So there are disbursement mechanics. If you look at the, I mean, prima facie work, it's to disburse capital, right? If they're not disbursing capital, I think they're losing money, right? So they're losing time value of money. So they're also looking out for certain things. So Satvik, what I'll do is I'll take your question in a bit. You raised your hand, but I'll take that question in a bit. Let me just quickly finish this off, and I think I'll take another 5-10 minutes, and I'll open it up to Q&A. Right? Right. So they're in the job of dispersing capital as we speak, right? And that becomes super important, right, to understand, because they're looking out for good investments. They're not against good investments, of course. So you need to maintain that relationship that you've gone to while you're rejigging your business plan, and I'll come down to the kind of pitches that typically are at problem, right? Um, Okay. The other thing that you have to look before you start rejigging is the environment. This is where, I mean, such a situation comes into place. See, a no in say a 2012, where when the markets are booming, is very different from no in say 2020 or 2008, right? Because that no is very dependent on the market, because people are afraid, people are holding on to capital, holding on to cash. That's the truth. I mean, there is no other two ways about it altogether, right? So there is no other way into looking at that particular thing. And whatever I say from here onwards, there's a huge asterisk, will not matter, because this is for a rational market. And a euphoric or a funeral market is something which I mean, you can't predict it. It's all the emotions take over you. All the decisions are made on certain emotions, are made on certain facts, certain things like FOMO, which get built into it. So a lot of these things are a part and parcel on that particular environment. So if you're in a rational environment, these suggestions which I will talk to you will matter, uh, and should matter even in a euphoric or a funeral market. But these two markets have this very weird way of functioning, where see, the challenge is very different. The challenge is different from a point of view that they are, how do I put this? They're not rational, right? So they're most likely the decision is coming from a certain emotion and a certain built up emotion that they've been working towards. Now, if you're in a rational market, which I hopefully in the next 2 quarters we'll come back to at some level, there will be rationality. While it might not be a booming market, I think rationality should come back at least in the next 3 quarters itself. Um, there is a rejig of plan. I mean, when you need to do something, when you've heard a lot more no's, is that you need to look at it from a risk assessment, right? So now I'm coming down towards uh, pure VC level knowledge, right? So I'm thinking about it from an investor point of view, and as an investor, I think it's the risk appetite first, which I look into, right? So, and I look at to my company from an outsider's in perspective. I look at from an investor point of view, and I look at what all risks that could be there, right? So there are nth number of risks, right? So you can start with founder risk. Do you have the right founding team? Will they be able to? Are they capable enough to pull it off? Are they able to attract capital? So on and so forth, right? So that becomes a founder risk, right? To address something like this, what you need to do is you need to add the right set of founding team partners itself. I think that's imperative. There's no other way to it. If you think you're high on founder risk, that's one of the aspects that you can only work along with in that particular way. You hire the right set of people, you hire the right set of founding team. Of course, there's going to be dilution, but I think it's the right thing to do, because if there is concern over there, then you should definitely get more people involved, the right set of people involved in the founding team itself. You look at market risk. I think this is what I was talking about. Will anyone want it? Will they want to pay for something of this sort of a product? The only way to answer that is you go to market, you get certain paying customers. Again, this is a catch-22 situation, because how many customers are you supposed to get, right? All of those questions need to be asked, right? Before you can say this is a valid thing. It differs, and it differs industry to industry. It differs product to product. It differs from ticket size to ticket size, and that's something that you have to play by according to what you do. But the easiest way to counteract market risk is to show customers, and preferably paying customers. If not paying customers, then at least the customers who can actually verify your claims across to a VC or an institutional investor. Then comes competition risk. I think differentiation is the key over here. I think if you're in a highly differentiated market, or your product is highly differentiated and in a particular market, your competition risk is already low, right? One of the key stupid things which a lot of startups do is in their decks, and this is where I'm going to address it, is that they say they have no competition. Uh, that is the most weirdest thing that you can say across to anyone, right? So because see, inherently, even if there is no competition, right? Even if there is no uh, bit which is coming into picture, right? So the challenge is very different if you ask me, right? The challenge is how do you showcase that this is important, right? Uh, but you need to still show that there are parallel examples in the market and how you're doing differently, because there's no company which has no competition at all, because there is someone or the other who's building something similar, or even if not similar, has some components which are there which can be competing, right? So you draw a landscape out in that particular scenario. And similarly, if you're in a really large market, what another set of challenges which a lot of these entrepreneurs do is that they say that I'm in a really large market. I'm in, say, agriculture, and I'm just going to capture 2% of the market, which will be good enough for me to survive. Um, the challenge is that there's going to be a 98% market still left. And just because your market is really large, your ambition to actually conquer that market, because like if you like it or you don't like it, investors like monopolistic ideas, right? If you're working towards getting and achieving a monopoly, you're most likely to get funding. I mean, again, so niches you can be in monopolistic, but if you're a really large market and you're saying this, I want to just capture 2%, I think that is wrong, right? I think if you're telling that VC that this particular bit, uh, then I think there's some question marks in your pitch altogether. So please do not put no competition. And I mean, I'm in a really large market. I can do whatever I want. I mean, I just want 2% of the market itself. I think the other risk which is involved is timing risk. I think, is it too early? Is it too late? Again, the question can be answered very easily if you have customers, paying customers, preferably, to validate and get this risk off the table itself. Then comes financing risk. I mean, the idea typically is that can you raise more capital? right? So typically the question is from a VC to VC is like, if you're doing Series A, can you do Series B? Can you do Series C? Can you do Series D? And so on and so forth, right? So similarly, an angel investor will ask a question whether this is fundable from a Series A perspective also, right? So that is a maybe from an exit point of view for any investor. That's one question. The other is that what is the total overall capital outlay that is needed? Right? What are the certain estimates that you're making across? And this is where I genuinely believe that you can showcase and be a little more prudent with the way you're financing your company. Uh, what are your salary outlays and how you're going about the outlays? How are you paying? Various other things. You have to be more prudent with capital. I think that's one of the ways that you can. Nobody can guarantee you the next round of funding, right? So it's as simple as that. There's no follow-on round of funding. I mean, everyone is doing a probability test over there, but you can be a little more prudent with how you spend capital to reduce that risk. So that's something which is completely under your control, right? Marketing risk is the other one. Is there a market for the product? Will they want it? Will they pay for it? Again, the same set of questions, which the market risk was able to come. And I mean, even further, right? So, will you be able to cut through the noise? What is the cost of that marketing cost altogether? What is that customer acquisition cost? Right. So, if you're in a very differentiated market, and which I hopefully hope that you guys are in, uh, this will be reduced drastically. Like your marketing cost, marketing risk will be reduced drastically if you're in a differentiated market. So differentiated market will be one which is not talking to the user for that particular problem or that particular need. Currently, there's no other product or very few products which are currently there. Then comes distribution risk. I think if you're in a business which has distribution partners that are needed to succeed, like say for example, you have a certain product where you can only work with mobile OEM manufacturers. Uh, it is a very tough market. First of all, let me just say that across the board, I might not be in the same market, or if I am in the same market, what I'll do is I'll try to cut a few deals before I go down for funding, right? Because if I have those deals in place, which are very tough to get, by the way, I am more likely to succeed over there. I'll take two risks: technology risk and product risk. Technology risk is about, can this product be built? Is the tech sufficient? Is it rocket science, or is it something that can easily be built? So from a technology risk point of view, I think yeah, I mean, if the only way to answer that particular question is get the product out, and that's typically, if you ask me, as a company, what Favcy does, right? It takes care of the technology risk, the product risk. It also looks into, at some level, the market risk also, because what we do is we only take and companies in where we feel there's a good chance or a high chance or an indicative chance of a good product market fit being achieved soon enough, right? So, and because of that, there is some bit of aspect of competition risk that we assess, because that's differentiation. Similarly, the marketing risk also gets taken care of when you're working along with the company. Rest of the stuff, if you ask me, is something that an entrepreneur always brings into the table, right? And I mean, similarly, is the product risk. The product risk, how is it different from tech risk? Is that, can this team do this? Right? So the team that you've assembled from a technology point of view to create a particular product, can this team actually do this particular thing? Can they build it? Again, the best way to answer this is getting the product out itself, right? So that's how you reduce that risk. At least get a beta out, at least in this particular case. Hiring risk, I mean, so you should upfront ask your investor in any format that, where do you see that particular bridge gap? If you see a gap, you fill in that position, right? So if you see that you're lacking operations and there's a huge concern from the investor side, you hire a person who is good in operations, who will take care of that. You hire a VP, or you hire an SVP, EVP, or a manager, whatever is needed to get that ball rolling itself, right? And the last one is location risk. I think nobody likes this particular side of it, but you need to be where the capital is at, right? So The reason why a lot of companies in Silicon Valley get funded is because that's where their money is at. Similarly, in India, in case of Bangalore or maybe Mumbai or Delhi, these are the three areas where, I mean, there is a decent amount of capital being deployed. And so is the case with Hyderabad also. Hyderabad is also coming up as a very, very good startup hub altogether. So the only way you can do that is by relocating yourself to these locations. And I mean, best of luck with that. Nobody likes that, but that's about it. I think it's a catch-22 situation on the funding side because I think we're in a market where it's funeral. A lot of people are just holding on to capital as we speak. It will be tough to raise funding. I think there's no doubt about that. There's no questions about it. But I think whenever rationality returns, I think you should definitely look into that. And another important thing, I think, if you're starting up right now, I think there are a lot more market opportunities in the market. Um, Early stage investors, specifically seed stage investors, will not shy away from deploying capital right now because I think they also understand that they'll be getting companies for a lot cheaper right now because the valuation circles are moving as we speak. They're getting rejig. The fundamentals are changing as we speak over there. So they'll definitely want to take advantage of this particular situation, and specifically any angel investor who's holding on to capital right now will definitely want to disburse capital as we speak. So all in all, I think there are two negatives. From a founder, if you're not ready for something of this sort of a challenge, I think you shouldn't start up irrespective, right? So that's one key takeaway if you're looking at it from a post COVID-19 scenario. The second scenario is that if you're in the market and you're trying to figure that out, according to me, if you're in a beautiful market, which uh, will most likely be situations that you have over here currently built in, right? So when I'm saying something like that, what I mean is, hey, there are enough number of places which suddenly have started adopting. There are more market opportunities. It's the right time to start up something on, say, video conferencing side of it, telemedicine side of it. Yeah, because there's a lot more adoption because there is a lot of people who are adopting things as we speak, right? So there are more opportunities in the market now as compared to the rest of the time itself. There are more people who are adopting to things. There are more things which are coming up as we speak. And finally, on the funding side, I think we're in a funeral market. Challenges will be to raise capital. I think early stage, seed stage, angel stage will come back quicker than we expect it to do because they're looking out for opportunity. It's the Series B, C, D, E, the more institutional investors, which will, I mean, companies which are on that particular track, which will have problems because typically what institutional investors will do in this particular scenario is that they'll want to hold on to cash to support the companies that they've already funded. So new funding deals will be a challenge right now. But angel investors, that being said, will be a slightly more liquid market as compared to the older stage companies itself, right? The last part, I mean, again, so when I was talking about it, I think the environment plays a key role. I think a no in the current times does not mean your idea is bad. It has to do with a lot more other things which are beyond you itself. Now, perfect. So what I'll do is I'll take up questions now. Oh, great. So Akash wants to talk, so I'll allow him to talk. Hi, Akash. Hello. Hello, Akash. Oh, okay. Okay. So he clearly is not being able to talk, so I've just disabled him. Okay, I'll take up Varun's question. I think he's been asking the question across to all attendees and panelists. So so I'll just read it out. The COVID pandemic is an unprecedented situation we all find ourselves. So much has already been talked about how it may pan out and what can we do to tide over this difficult time. The risk of sounding insensitive, I believe, post-corona business world would be an excellent opportunity for some particular business lines of businesses, industries due to major global flux. As per your experience in the startup world, which industry do you see particularly booming in corona? So I'm going to answer this live right now. See, Varun, uh, I'm not the guy who has the crystal ball, right? I can't tell you how this is going to pan out, right? So it can pan out in so many different ways. It's not even funny. But that being said, I think you're bang on. You have a lot more opportunities. This is something which I addressed in my chat also. I think the market is ripe. There's more adoption as we speak. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think your experience in the startup world. In my experience, I think a lot more of video conferencing startups will come up. I think there will be a lot more bit on focus on health tech, governance. I think civic tech is going to be one of the key things which a lot of people will start looking into, right? So, um, surveillance, for example, I think our privacy policy on tech needs to come out. I think governance will be one of those uh, areas which will work, and a lot of more solutions will start coming over there. Health tech, for that matter, diagnostics, health tech. These startups will work. I mean, will really attract capital in a post Corona, even in during Corona, for that matter. If you're starting something like this. Additionally, I think a lot of industries will get changed as we speak, right? So I think there's a huge boost towards the gig economy side of it, and I think work from home is becoming a reality as we speak. Webinars, I mean, these sort of webinars will become a new reality because we're adopting to it. We're getting used to it as we speak along, right? So various opportunities. In fact, all the industries will be open and ripe for transformation, um, and that's the truth. And that's honestly my answer. I think there will be so many different opportunities that I mean it's uh, bad to say that this industry will be better, this industry will not be better. I think a lot more people are adopting right now. I think this is exactly the right time to start any startup. And I mean, honestly, if you're asking me, if you start a startup in this particular environment, I think this talks about more about you as a person, as a founder, who has the gumption and the balls to actually do something like this. Right. So I think, and investors love that, by the way. So this is one of the key things that you have showcased is that the faith in your own ideas itself. So I hope, Varun, I've answered your question. I hope you've not left the webinar before I've answered your question, but I hope I have answered the question adequately. Any other questions that anyone has? I mean, I'm happy to take them. I think we're about over with time also, and I think I can take 2-3 questions more. No one. Okay, perfect. So I think that's about. Okay, someone has raised their hands. Okay. Yeah, Satvik. Satvik, you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself and you ask me your question.
Yeah, am I?
Yeah, hi, Satvik, you're audible now.
So Nischaiy, I don't know if it's more so like if it's less so right now because of the COVID-19 crisis.
Okay.
But in the past 1 or 2 years, I personally have felt that valuations, or if you look at VC funding, that's been driven more by revenues, traffic, maybe, and it's become more of a passing game. Do you think that sort of thing, like when the global economy recovers from the COVID crisis, do you think VC could be the next bubble that we see in terms of a financial crisis with the insane valuations that companies are driving and fundings that they're raising every year, every 2 years from large giants like Bank or other funds, Nexus, Sequoia in India? Do you think VC could be a potential bubble?
So let me answer this in the correct manner for a VC to also hear it out, right? So, so the model is very different for these guys. Yeah? So, while it is a valuation game, it is a game of generating returns, right? So I mean, 1 out of 10 startups should work according to them, right? Or 1 out of 20 startups should work. So they bet on startups on that particular manner. So what they're doing is when they're diversifying the portfolio, for example, they're betting across 20 companies in a portfolio, right? And typically, if you ask me, they play the valuation game the best, actually, right? So specifically, the the original valuation, I mean, the paper valuation that you receive, for example, is actually not the real valuation of a company altogether. Because the reason why that happens is because there are liquidation preferences that these guys get, right? So if anyone's putting in more money and coming in the last round, he will get the liquidation preference across the board. So he will get that money first, uh, and then get towards it. So the challenge actually in Indian market, if you ask, is very limited exit opportunities for VCs altogether. So I empathize with them on that particular side. That uh, exits are not enough. There are not enough exits for the VCs, because at the end of the day, the VC has like a term, typically a period of 10 years, for example, when they've started a fund.
Yeah.
They have to showcase a certain return, right, in those particular nth number of years, which they have to actually outperform the market, right? So there is a particular rate of return that they've set, and anything above that, they actually make money of that. So they make money of carry, right? So there's a concept of carry, and they take a certain percentage from the LPs that they have organized in their funds itself. So that is one of the key aspects to look into when you're looking at it from a bubble perspective, right? So it will be a bubble if they don't find any buyers, right? If they don't find any exits, for example. Um, Fortunately for these guys, the amount of exits that they need is one in, like, say, 20 or one in 10, right? Where they can exit from a position. So VC as a bubble is not a problematic thing. I think they're making money irrespective. I think.
So when I mentioned that, my basic idea is that from a VC's perspective, perhaps the model would be currently sufficient to enable them to generate some returns. But when I talk about that, what I essentially mean is that the role of VC or a private equity fund or any investor is playing is pumping more money and scaling revenues for these companies.
Okay.
But how relevant do you think the profits or the business model are? Because as you said right now, for VC, the most important thing is that when they're diversifying their investments, they get an exit out of at least one or two companies, and that is usually sufficient to generate a good return on the
Yeah.
portfolio.
Yeah.
But with that mindset, would the VC actually be inclined to play a role in growing that company or facilitating that company, moving it towards a better business
So
model,
it
or
depends
is
on VC to
it
VC.
only about exits?
Yeah. So it depends on VC to VC, right? So no, so it is always about exits. That's one particular part that you should understand, because it's on that particular side, Satvik. Right? So that's more important. Uh, but that being said, there are some good VCs. Then there are some not so great VCs, which are actually betting on the market rather than the startup itself, right? So there are two types of VCs I typically talk about. There are people who work on macroeconomic trends, and then there are people who assess a company and want to build that as a company altogether. And both strategies have their own problems, as well as pros. You see Tiger Global, for example, working on that particular strategy, where they worked on a macro trend of e-commerce becoming big in India, and they bet it across the board, right? So they bet on Jabong, they bet on Flipkart, they bet on Mintra, they bet on everything, and then what they did was they just got everyone into one particular company itself, right? So, and what happens in that is that because you're making and controlling a larger set of the market, your some of your whole company is more valuable than the parts that they were, right? So obviously what happens in that particular scenario is they get a higher valuation, and at some level they also get exits when they get another company of the portfolio to buy the other company also, right? So that is very, very interesting. But eventually for them to also get an exit, not for Tiger, but like for general investors to get an exit, they actually had to get a Walmart to buy out the company altogether, right?
Mm-hmm.
So uh, it's dependent, right? So some people, some VCs look into macro, some VCs look into as simply as into the company itself, right? So again, you have to find your comfort with whatever VC that you get, right? So um, if someone's looking into the market and working onto that, nothing like it. get that particular VC money because he believes in the market. And if someone believes in the market, as I said in my slides, not slides, but in my presentation today or my webinar today, is that great markets will get good products out. Right? So you'll be, I mean, at least mildly successful in your startup if you're in a great market. That's the least. Right. So I think markets, I cannot stress enough, are the most important thing. The market that you operate in is far, because I personally don't believe a lot of people can do transformative products altogether. Right. There's only a select few of people who on this planet can do transformative products. But I think there's a larger chunk of people who can do non-transformative products, but being in the right market can actually have more success as we build now. I hope I've answered your questions, Satvik. Or
So just one thing. So, if we're talking about the VC perspective and we look at the economy as a whole, if that is the driving mindset that exit is going to be the more foremost thing, and it should be
it's a
so. But
macroeconomic mindset as to what industry will grow and do really well. So there are certain companies which just do that, for example, right? There's certain VCs which will just go with that particular thematic, and they will understand that I need to fund as many companies as possible to hedge my bets across the board. Now, if out of the 5 companies which I've funded in this particular sector, if 3 start doing really well, I do follow-on rounds over there, and I do not give the other 2 companies the follow-on rounds, and maybe I merge them into the other companies altogether. Right. Similarly, I keep on doing that till I get one major entity which controls a large set of that market itself. So what they do is, in with the capital that they have at their disposal, what they do is they control a large monopolistic aspect of the market itself using that capital
Mhm.
itself. So what happens is you have 6 players, 7 players, 10 players, which I mean everyone knows cannot be sustained in that particular market because the market's not that large enough. Also, right? There are 10 players, 15 players, for example, and I fund like say 7 of those players, right? So I'm taking a in this particular scenario, I'm taking an industry bet, right? So I'm taking a macro industry bet that this industry is going to grow.
Mhm. So, there is this deep tech company that I interned with that's
Okay.
into deep tech venture capital investment. So, it's a VC out of Delhi.
Okay.
And now, taking that as an example, if you have someone more willing, or let's say if you don't have a company that's doing really great, but you have someone who doesn't clearly see that and who's there to invest in it to give you an exit, then doesn't that cause problems for the industry as a whole? If you look it from that perspective, that's somewhat similar to what happened in the 7-8 crisis, because the other person was more willing to enter a particular investment, and you could just keep that particular asset moving and moving.
Okay, so that's the. I mean, so do you know what greater fool theory is? Typically,
I'm sorry.
greater fool theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, literally everyone in the capital market, any form of investing that you're ever in, never wants to be in the greater fool. Like I mean, in fact, people try their entire lives not to be the greater fool. Right. So that's one of the situations where see, typically what happens is it's a so investment is a game of belief. I personally believe that if you believe if this is the correct valuation, I think, and if I match it across with someone else, I think in that particular scenario, and someone else is ready to willing to buy into that, that's how capital markets work. I mean, there is no other way to it, right? So if a lot of people believe in it, it's validated from the market that this company is at this particular valuation. So
Mhm.
that is true, right? So I mean, now it's about just getting people to believe in that particular valuation, right? So if WeWork wasn't able to convince a lot of people to do a 20x multiplier on the revenues that they were generating, for example, or 15x for that matter, right? I think 15
Mhm.
to 10 के बीच में था कहीं जिनका valuation multiplier था. It's their fault, right? Because they may have not marketed it properly, but uh, the people who set the valuation are the buyers, as always, right? So it's not the person who's selling the equity; it's the buyer who actually decides the price, right? Because you have to agree to a particular valuation, right? Here is WeWork, which is pitching itself as a tech company, drawing the bit out on the whole thing in a format where it's done at a tech multiplier that you have to put across. And again, that's irrational if you actually ask me,
Mhm.
right? Because WeWork is not a tech company; it's a real estate company, right? That multiplier that you're putting across over there is irrational. So according to me, it's irrational, right? But am I the person who's buying the equity stock? I'm not. And I mean, if a large set of people who do not agree to it and do not buy into that vision, then I mean, it's not valued at that. But if a large set of people suddenly did, then I mean, all of us would be clapping for SoftBank pulling off a great exit for itself. I think it's as simple as that. It's the belief system that people want to believe in and go through with it. Okay. Anyone else who wants to ask a particular question besides Satvik? Okay. I think we're good. I think I'm going to go now. Thank you for your time, guys. It was a pleasure chatting and taking up a couple of questions over here. I hope I was able to add some value to across to you guys. Thank you so much.